Greetings and welcome to the Old Dog Zendo at Iron Mountain in this edition of Dharma Dirt. In Zen and in other spiritual traditions, there are questions, the ones that are said to drive us to practice of the way. Why am I here? Why was I born? Why must I die? Is there any purpose in the universe, or is it just random interactions of atoms and molecules? The questions about the origins of the universe, its ultimate fate, have been pondered by philosophers for thousands of years. But I doubt most people are too worried about cosmology or metaphysics. But those same questions arise in what may seem like more mundane forms. Why am I still in the same job after 20 years? Why do I bother getting up in the morning and going to work or to class? Why do I have such difficulty in finding work? Why can't I find a really satisfying career? Why do I spend my life writing quarterly reports that no one reads? Why do I tie one on every Friday night? Why do I veg out in front of the TV every evening? And so on. Actually, these sorts of questions are really manifestations of the cosmic questions I mentioned earlier. The operative word here is why. Now, it's easy to ignore this why for a time, but it will continue to crop up. Why do I do this or that? Why? If it's not seriously addressed at some point, your life eventually becomes numb, little different from the plodding of an ox pulling a plow. Or it devolves into a life of quiet desperation, a hollow feeling in the pit of the stomach that no amount of distraction or drinking or drugs can cure. A wise man once said that man's greatest need is for meaning. If you can seriously address this question, why, it can direct you toward that meaning. There's a koan that addresses this case directly. It's case number 16 in the Wu Men Guan, a collection assembled by Master Wu Men in the 11th century. Here it is. Yun Men said, "Look, this world is vast and wide. Why do you put on your 7-piece robe at the sound of the bell?" This is typical Master Yun Men. He throws out a question, and either he answers it himself, or, as in this case, he doesn't even bother to answer. Who will answer? Each one of us must eventually answer. This world is vast and wide. Why do you put on your 7-piece robe at the sound of the bell? The 7-piece robe. This is the kesa, comes from the Sanskrit kashaya. It's worn by ordained persons. It is said that one day the Buddha was walking with his attendant Ananda, and seeing a rice field, the Buddha asked Ananda to design a robe patterned after the staggered rows of the rice field. One of the sights I saw on pilgrimage in India was the rice fields, and their staggered rows are just as they were 2,500 years ago. Traditionally, the kesa is made up of scraps of cloth that have been discarded, perhaps found in the charnel ground. The saying is, burned by fire, munched by oxen, gnawed by mice, worn by the dead. The monks would stitch the pieces together to form that pattern of a rice field. Then it was dyed using roots, bark, or whatever plant material was available. The result was a very dark brown or black, which was necessary to obscure all the stains. In modern Buddhism, the kessa is worn by some priests and have become luxurious brocades. I wonder what the Buddha would think of that. A priest generally wears the full kessa. A lay ordinand wears the raksu. That's an abbreviated form of the kessa. It originated in China during the times when Buddhist monks and nuns were forced out of the monasteries and forbidden to wear the traditional robes. So they took to wearing a small version of the kessa secretly under their lay clothes. Now it's worn by lay Buddhist practitioners. I wear this raksu when I'm fulfilling my role as a lay teacher. In most centers, the raksu is given to those who enter a lay order of some sort and commit to the practice of the way as the focus of their lives. In our tradition, the raksu is given only after a year or so of study. This world is vast and wide. Why do you put on your 7-piece robe at the sound of the bell? Yunmen was a monk speaking to other monks. But this question is not really about monks or robes or about a kessa or a raksu. Is it even about a bell? The world is vast and wide. No, it is not just vast and wide. It is timeless and spaceless, beyond all dimensions. All Buddhas throughout space and time, filling the countless worlds, infinity beyond infinity. You yourself are the same. You are Buddha, vast, wide, infinite, and eternal. The world is vast and wide, yet here are Yunmen's monks sitting together in the temple zendo. They get up when the wake-up bell rings and put on their robes. In a modern Zen center, one might take off street clothes and put on a robe. As the bell rings, one enters the zendo, bows, takes a seat in the prescribed manner. The han, a wooden board, is struck, and a small bell rings to signal the beginning of a round of sitting. And everyone engages the practice. Why? The world is vast and wide. We get up in the morning, shower, get dressed, eat, get ready to go to work. The world is vast and wide. We get the kids ready for school. Did you finish your homework? Do you have your lunch? The world is vast and wide. Boy, I'd really love to go to a movie, but I teach a class tomorrow, and I still have a lot of prepping to do. Maybe sometime next month. There are mornings when we don't feel like going to work, or to the temple, or to school. So what do? We flog ourselves with reasons, with whys. If I don't get that report finished, I'm in deep doo-doo. If I'm late again, there goes the promotion. We hit ourselves over the head with whys. I remember a cartoon in a magazine, might have been the New Yorker, from many years ago. It's early morning, and a man, having just woken up, is sitting on the edge of the bed looking half asleep and totally miserable. His wife is standing in the doorway saying, "Of course you have something to live for. We need a new water heater. The roof needs fixing. The orthodontist bill just came. Wonderful. We live in a constant thrall to all sorts of signals and cues. Bells, alarm clocks, schedules, calendars, contracts, and on and on. Not for nothing are our lives sometimes called a rat race. And it seems like there's no escape. Does real freedom exist? Can we ever be liberated? The world is vast and wide. You are vast and wide, but how would you show that world to a starving homeless person, to a drug addict desperate for the next fix, to a quadriplegic, to someone serving a life sentence in a penitentiary? What is it to be vast and wide? The world is vast and wide. Why do we sit in our 7-piece robes or our sweats doing zazen? To get enlightenment, to relieve stress, to attain happiness, to gain occult powers, learn to levitate. Or is this just a place where I can be quiet for a bit, just to see what happens? I practice zazen to get enlightenment. Well, I don't seem to be getting enlightened, so maybe I'm doing this for happiness. Well, I'm still not very happy, so maybe I'm doing it for whatever. I'm doing it for this, that, and the other. Reasons, causes, excuses are myriad and also temporary. Whatever reasons you have or think you have to take up this practice, to get up in the morning or not get up, to go to the work or not go to work, they change and they change. There's a rather humorous poem by a 17th century English philosopher named Henry Aldrich. It goes like this. If on my theme I rightly think, there are 5 reasons why men drink. Good wine, a friend, or being dry, or lest we should be by and by, or any other reason why. We all know how the alcoholic or the addict will conjure up all sorts of whys to justify the addiction. We can always come up with reasons. I am this because of that. I do this in order that that may be. I do that in order to prevent something else. Robert Heinlein wrote, "Man is not a rational animal. He is a rationalizing animal." And in our rationalizing, there's always the assumption of a bottom line, an expected result, a known outcome. But there are no known outcomes. The future is utterly unknowable. To commit to a marriage, a spiritual practice, a job, to having children, is to commit to the unknown. No matter how virtuous the life we lead or practice, if we attach to reasons around that life or that practice, we are caught up in cause and effect. And the causes are always changing. So where does this why come from? Who is it that must know why? Does a bird ask, "Why do I fly?" Does a tree ask, "Why do I make leaves?" Does the wind ask, "Why do I blow?" Does a fire ask, "Why do I burn?" It's in the depth of our zazen that we begin to see the origin of why. Cause and effect is an illusion clung to by the rationalizing mind, by the ego self. Cause and effect is a fundamental teaching of the Buddha, but also just another term for samsara, the endless wheel of life, suffering, old age, sickness, death, and rebirth. As long as we chase after things, driven by all those whys, we are trapped on the wheel. This ego self will always have doubts about its own existence, its own reality. That's to be expected, after all. It is nothing more than an illusion. Why is a way of reinforcing the illusion. If I can find a why for my life, then I can be comfortable and secure in the illusion. If there is no why, then I cannot justify my existence. I simply am. That is the great mystery. Jesus said, "Before Abraham, I am." Zhao Zhou said, "Before the empty eon, I am." A young man named Siddhartha asked, "Why is there suffering?" Eventually, he transcended that why, left it behind, and became the Buddha. No, we are not free from the circumstances of our lives. We are free as the circumstances of our lives. As long as there is self apart, acting and being acted upon, there can never be liberation. It might seem easy enough to say, "Okay, I give up the why." But can you live without it? Can you live? Get up in the morning, go to work, to school, care for your kids, put on the seven-piece robe without that why? Can we live a life of just doing? Why is not inevitable. Why do I scratch my nose? It itches. But if I am doing zazen at a formal sitting, my nose may itch and I don't scratch it. It just itches. The old saw about when I'm hungry I eat, when I'm tired I rest, doesn't necessarily apply. There are times when I'm hungry and I don't eat. I'm just hungry. I'm tired and I don't rest. I'm just tired. I am free to eat or not to eat, to rest or not to rest. You are free to put on your robe or not to put on your robe. So where then is this why? It's only with realization of the true empty nature of why that the world becomes vast and wide. This realization is not comfortable. The reasons, the why, give us a kind of security and a way of avoiding responsibility. But that security comes at a cost. The cost is to remain in bondage. But now, honored one, now that you are vast, wide, timeless, and spaceless, why do you put on your seven-piece robe at the sound of the bell? It is here that we touch the great mystery. And we realize that it is only because the world is vast and wide that you can put on your seven-piece robe at the sound of the bell. There's no contradiction. Together with all beings, we realize the way.